Greetings and salutations, everyone. Kathy Brooks here at the Hydrant Club, and I am masked because I'm here in a room with people, and we are adhering strictly to COVID protocols. So my apologies for if I'm muffled. Hopefully you guys will be able to hear me, but I'm here with the gang at Hydrant Club today. We're doing a little bit of internal training on canine linguistics, and you guys get to tune in for a little bit of that class. So in the explanation of what we're going to be doing for today's edition of Canine Linguistics, we're actually talking about learning to speak dog. So there's a number of really great books that you can read on the topic by some really, really smart folks who have been studying canine behavior, dog psychology for a very, very long time. There's a fellow by the name of Stanley Coren, that's C-O-R-E-N. He's out of Vancouver, British Columbia. He's a psychologist, does some really, really great work. He's got a book, actually, How to Speak Dog, or How to Talk to Your Dog. And a lot of the work, he's actually the one, if you ever saw, there was a large diagram on the intelligence of dogs. And it outlined all of the different breeds and basically had intelligence as a binary function. It had it as dogs are smart, dogs are stupid, and kind of on a spectrum in between. Well, data doesn't show that to be true, because what's happened in the last 20 years or so is an enormous amount of real statistical analysis. And so let's be clear on what data means and what science means. So if you're doing scientific research, you have to first set up a circumstance in which you can replicate conditions over and over and over, and replicate those conditions over a substantial enough number of cases that you can have what is considered a reasonable statistical data set. So a lot of these, so there was a research study that came out recently saying that, grain-free diets kill dogs. Well, their data set was like 100 dogs, which isn't a statistical data set when you think about the number of dogs that exist on the planet or in any given city. So let's talk a little bit about the data around dog behavior. And so dog intelligence used to be thought to be binary. So you had really smart dogs like border collies and German shepherds, and then you had dogs that weren't quite so smart, but boy were they cute. Now here's the thing. To say that a dog is smart or stupid based on a binary set of information is really the same as saying people are smart or stupid based on a binary analysis, and that is fundamentally not true. You've got people who are great at math, but they're crap when it comes to anything language-based. And then you have people who are exactly the opposite. You have people who are not necessarily academically smart, but they have other proficiencies in things that they're really good at. You have people who do terribly in school, but who become leaders, who lead entire groups of people and can motivate groups of people to do great things. So which of these people are smart? The answer is all of them. It's like there's a parable that you may have heard. It's the parable of the blind men and the elephant. So the story goes, you take 5 men who can't see, and you put them around an elephant. And you put each of them at a different part of the elephant. One is at the ear, one is at the trunk, one is at the leg, one is at its side, and one is at its tail. I wouldn't want to be the guy at the tail, by the way. But you put them each there, and you have them touch the elephant, and then you have them tell you what is an elephant. Well, the man who's by the trunk is probably going to tell you that the elephant is something of like a snake. And the one by the ear is going to tell you that an elephant is much like a sail of a ship that's blowing in the wind. The one by the leg is going to tell you that an elephant is like a tree, a big trunk of a tree. There's one by the side is going to tell you that the elephant is like a brick wall, while the one at the tail is going to tell you that the elephant is like a rope. So who's right? So the answer is that they are all correct based on their specific perspective, but the truth is actually the aggregate, the collection of all of those things together is what makes an elephant. So let's talk about dog intelligence from that perspective. Now, the dog is the most man-made species on the planet. We have selectively bred this naturally occurring line of canid, something that existed in just a few different forms And we have selectively bred them over how many thousands of years, guys?
50,000.
Almost. 18,000. 18,000 years. It's a really long time. So we have for 18,000 years been selectively breeding dogs to do specific things because they were fast, because they could jump high, because they could herd things and hunt things and chase things down, because they could go down into tunnels after vermin. They could do all sorts of things. So we have selectively bred them for specific jobs, and those jobs required very specific kinds of intelligence. The kind of intelligence required of an old English sheepdog, which was often sent out into the field without a human around to manage the small livestock, whether it be sheep or goats, versus the border collie who goes out with the human and works symbiotically in concert with the human to manage and guide the cattle. Two very different kinds of intelligence. The old English sheepdog needs to make decisions on its own, needs to be very sure in those decisions and not really move from those decisions. Whereas a dog like a border collie is very, very connected to following the human. So why do these things matter, and what does it have to do with dog communication? It has everything to do with it. If somebody, so there's some people who learn well by getting their hands on something, other people need to read something. Other people need to hear it and see it, so different people learn in different ways. So it is also for the dogs. There are some dogs also that have very forward energy, like they're gonna make decisions whether you guide them to something or not. And so making sure that that dog's structure, that dog's understanding of where it fits in the world is really, really clear. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. All dogs live in a hierarchy. That hierarchy has to have very clear leadership at the top. And if there isn't clear leadership, the dog will act out based on where it naturally falls. So when you think about how that plays in, I'm sorry, I'm leaning forward because I'm trying to read. There's a comment here. Being binary. Yes, and so one of the comments is that, you think about this idea of binary intelligence in a dog really playing into, you could, not to go too far off the field here, you could look at what's happening in the world today in terms of the tribalism, this other than, this driving wedges between people and saying that the things that make us different are the things that should separate us, and that we should go against people who are different than we are, who think different than we do, it's antithetical to how we exist as a species. We, as Brene Brown says so eloquently, are genetically hardwired to belong to a group. Dogs are too. It's one of the reasons why we get along so well with them. So understanding the intelligence level in terms of the kind of intelligence that a dog has is really, really important. Now, there's some communication that is irrespective of breed. And I know I shouldn't be touching my face, but I'm wearing a mask, so. I don't know about any of you guys, but I didn't realize how much I touch my face until I put a mask on. Crazy. Oh, and I also just realized my nail polish matches my mask. Look at that, I'm accessorizing well. It's the new accessorizing in today's world is, matching your mask to your nail polish. But I digress. So back to dog communication. So how do dogs communicate? Dogs communicate using an array of different methods. And when we are in a room with dogs, so there's 3 dogs in here right now, and two more humans, and then me. I guess so 3 humans, 3 dogs. So dogs are communicating with us all the time, and we with them, based on how we choose to sit or not sit near them, based on how we choose to engage or not engage, and based on the nature of that engagement, the tone of our voice, the way that we touch them, where we touch them, all of that. These are all things that the dog understands. So let's look at kind of how the dog understands the world. When a puppy is born, it can't see, can't hear, can't even really move around. The only sense that is online when that puppy comes into the world is its sense of smell. And that is supercharged. Over the next week or so, the eyes come open, and then the ears come open, pup starts moving around. But in the first several weeks of that puppy's life, that puppy is never away from its mother. If it starts wandering away, mama grabs it, brings the puppy back. Starts wandering away, mama grabs it, brings the puppy back. And it is a gentle but firm grab of the puppy, bring the puppy back. Now, at around 6 weeks, the pup is now weaned. And so the pup is, around 5, 6 weeks, puppy starting kind of like meander away a little bit. But if the puppy gets stuck somewhere, so like let's say the puppy kind of leaves the nest with the mom and gets wedged next to a table or gets stuck behind something and can't figure out, kind of walks into a narrow space and can't figure out how to back up and can't turn around, puppy's going to start to cry. That mama is going to be there in a split second. She's going to be there. She's going to grab the puppy. She's going to bring the puppy out. She's going to soothe the puppy, comfort the puppy, help the puppy be safe. At around 6.5, 7 weeks, the puppy is going to start getting a little more adventurous. And here's what's interesting. Mama's going to let the puppy cry for a minute if the puppy gets stuck somewhere. She's going to wait. She's going to give him a minute. She's going to let him figure it out a little bit. Now, if the puppy continues to be in distress, can't find its way out, and the puppy starts going into real distress, mama is, of course, at that point going to go get the puppy, bring the puppy out. But her comforting isn't, like a soothing. She gives it kind of a deep growl. It's a warm, deep growl. She'll be giving it very firm licks with her tongue, holding the puppy very firmly. When we think about how we comfort as humans, it's a very soothing turn. It's okay. You're okay. You're going to be okay. There's kind of a light touch. So those gestures, that tone of voice, actually implies to a dog discomfort, not comfort. So when I coo at a puppy that's uncomfortable and is scared, and I'm saying, it's okay, little one, you're okay. All that puppy hears is, shit, they're just as uncomfortable as I am. So we've automatically destabilized them. So now, here's another thing to think about. So puppies around 7.5, 8 weeks old, 9 weeks old. What usually happens to a puppy at that point in time? That's the point in time where the puppy is pulled from its mother, pulled from the family that it knows, and gets thrown into houses with us. Very loving, very well-intentioned people. Now, puppy's going to cry for a lot of reasons, or may whimper for a lot of reasons, because they're afraid, because they're uncomfortable, because they're puppies. And what do? Pick them up, comfort them. We tell them they're going to be okay in a way that to us makes perfect sense. To the dog, does not give any sort of connotation of comfort. Think of it much in the way when a small child falls on a playground and skins their knee. What they do first is they look and they see the skinned knee and they see a little bit of blood and they look to the adult. And if the adult says, oh, here, let me take a look at that, and wipes the tears, looks at their knee, it's just a little scrape, and they say, you know what, it's okay, honey. Go play with your friends, you're fine. So that's one situation. Or you've got the helicopter parent. Oh my God, honey, let me see your leg. Are you okay? Here, let's go get an ice. So that kid's gonna immediately start to scream like a lunatic, and they learn, when this happens, and I do this, it elicits the response that I'm looking for. Essentially, we co-sign their bullshit without even knowing that we do it and without even really necessarily meaning to. So one of the things that's really important to think about when we're engaging with our dogs is the tone of voice that we're using. Because the tone that we think is assertive often just comes off sounding like we're pissed off or that we're really, really angry. So it's important to really think about that tonality in our voice and the gestures that we're combining it with, so that what we're doing is actually giving the dog a sense of comfort and assertiveness rather than more discomfort. What do you got? Oh, we got Sloan taking notes. I love that. Clear so far back here? Awesome. So this is where I'll open the floor. If there are any questions that people have, you can feel free to chime in. I'll be happy to take any questions live for those who are watching it live. If you're watching the recorded version, sorry, I can't really do anything about that, but you can post comments and we will get notified of the comments and we'll be sure to respond to them. So when it comes to dog language, what is it that I'm looking for to interpret? Okay, so we've got tone of voice, we've got the vocalizations of the dog. So dogs don't talk per se. They do have sound that they use. They vocalize, though they can't verbalize, they can vocalize. And dog vocalizations are set apart by three rough categories. There's pitch. So is the sound low, medium, or high? There's duration, and that is the sound long, medium, or short. And then there's pattern or repetition. So is it a one and done? Is it a pattern that repeats? Is it a pattern that escalates and gets faster or louder? So I'll give you an example. A week or so ago, I was on a trip and I'm sitting at an intersection and there's a Walgreens. And out in front of the Walgreens is an enormous Labrador. Now I would imagine that dog to have a big bass sounding bark, had a nice big body cavity. And what I heard from the dog was first a series of very high-pitched whines, and then it would bark. It gave a bark, and then a bark, like that. That is a dog alerting because there's somebody at the door. And then they see the person walk through the door. They're like, oh, hey, I know you. I don't have to bark at you anymore. Hi, Pam. Hi. So with dog vocalizations, come on in. Oh, you want to come into you want to have anything you want to say? Do you want to add anything and talk to the internet? Not so much. Okay, so we've got pitch, duration, and frequency. And so what this dog essentially was saying was, hey, I'm over here. Hey, I'm here. And the pitch of it was getting higher and higher and higher, and the frequency was repeating, and then it would pause, and then it would start with another high-pitched whine, and the pattern would continue. Combined with that, when I'm looking at a dog or listening to a dog, what I'm combining with that is looking at the dog's body language. So dogs, like humans, have body language. Some people, you ever walk in a room and somebody's like, oh, hi, they're super, super stiff, their shoulders are really tight, they just seem really uncomfortable. Well, dogs have body language too, except their body language, maybe their chest may be very squared off and forward, they may kind of be retreated or tucked in, and obviously a dog that is retreating and tucking away should not be followed. The number of times I've seen a dog that is and not cowering, but physically retreated, and its head is kind of like this, and its ears are back against its head, and its tail is kind of low and wagging. The number of people I've seen reaching and going, oh, hi, here, let me touch you. And what usually then happens is the dog then barks or snaps its teeth, and the person retreats, right? So it's important to really watch a dog's body language, look at its facial expression. I had a dog the other day. I went to see a new client, and it's a beautiful, beautiful young Weimaraner, not so young, he's a couple of years old, who really is very, very fearful. Everything about this dog's body language says, leave me alone. And when somebody, while I was there, the FedEx guy came to the door and rang the doorbell, and that dog threw himself against the door, except his body language, while he was throwing himself at the door, his tail was down, his ears were back, and he presented very fearfully. It was very much a defense attack from the dog, trying to get the person away from the door. And so when I intervened and came in and grabbed his collar, he didn't even know what to do with that, but he relaxed immediately. And then, of course, he became a little fearful of me, so we had to work through those issues. So you have to think about the body language of the dog. There was a video that Cesar Millan posted a number of years ago. It was Caesar's worst bite. It was a yellow lab, and everything about the dog's body language in this video said, leave me alone. And what Caesar did in that moment, the reason he got bitten, is he advanced in, because it made better television, I suppose, and the dog went right after him and it got him pretty badly. So we have to think about the actions that we take, because if we're not listening to a dog's body language, if we're not following the lead that they're setting for us, the likelihood is that the one that's going to get punished for the result of that behavior isn't going to be us, the human. Because if the dog bites me, while I may get bitten, the dog is the one who will ultimately be punished for my failure. There was a wonderful PSA done a couple of years ago, and a very heartbreaking PSA that started with a young kid with a dog, and you see the kid dressing the dog up and hugging the dog and holding the dog, and it goes forward and you see, you don't see what happens, but you figure that something happens, and the next thing you know, you see a picture of the dog in a cage at a shelter. And then they reverse the whole thing and they tell the thing from the dog's perspective. And the voiceover from the dog goes something like this. I was so excited about my new family, and my new sibling really liked to spend time with me. I'll come back to that in a minute. But she wanted to dress me up in clothes, and I really didn't like it. And she held me really close, even though I tried to tell her that made me feel uncomfortable. And I tried to tell her. I tried to tell her with my eyes, and I told her with my ears, and I told her with sounds that I made. I told her with how I was sitting, and I told her with my tail, but nobody would listen. So I tried to tell her again, and now I'm here. And it's heartbreaking. And one of the things that I've said on a couple of occasions, and if you are someone who has a child and you have a dog, or you've just gotten a puppy for your kids, I mean no disrespect by what I'm about to say, but children and dogs are a horrible combination unless managed properly. And it is very important. I don't care how small your dog is. I don't care how big your dog is. Most people, when they've got a big dog with kids, they think about managing the kid with the dogs and making sure that they're moderating and managing and monitoring the behavior, not leaving the kid alone with the dog, really taking good caution with a big dog. But those precautions are just as critical with a small dog. Because the small dogs, we always assume that the small dogs, they want to be held, they like to be held, but dogs also need their own space. So making sure that you're giving your dog space is really, really important. Please listen. Please do that. Okay, so we've got vocalizations, we've got pitch, duration, and frequency. We've also got body language. So that's the position of the ears, the position of the tail, the physical posture of the dog. Now, what's important to think about in this particular area is what the dog's neutral state is, which of course, if it's a dog that's not familiar to you, that's really difficult to know. Like, you don't know is that just how the dog stands, or is the dog having a particular emotion or feeling right now? Which is why I suggest, if it's a dog you don't know, don't touch it. Just don't touch it. Just look at the dog from a distance, just keep walking. And you're talking to somebody who would, given a choice, would spend more time with dogs than people. Oh wait, I do spend more time with dogs than people, right? So I would love to be able to touch all dogs that I see, but at the end of the day, since most people aren't particularly well-versed or educated enough in what their dog's body language is actually saying, if you ask someone, is your dog friendly? Most owners will say yes, because the dog is friendly to them. The dog is friendly in environments that they've seen. And so they may not be aware that their dog is uncomfortable in that moment. And if you ask someone, may I touch your dog? And the person does have the presence of mind to say, I'd really prefer you don't, or thank you for asking, but no. Don't then pull I'm a dog whisperer, dogs just love me, and ignore the owner. That's really not a great idea. No matter how great you may be with dogs, always follow the owner's guidance if they say please don't, or if the owner seems to be hesitating, it's just best not to do it. But if you don't know a dog's neutral or natural body position, being able to determine where the dog's body position sits in terms of its feelings, it's really difficult to figure out. Now, if you're very well versed in dogs, you're very well versed in breeds, you're very familiar with what a natural body state for a particular dog is, then that might give you a little bit more information. So that's great if you have that data. But then even dogs that have a particular carriage of their body, so you think of the Huskies and the other northern breeds whose tails are kind of by nature kind of carried up and high over their back just in a natural state, or the Basenji whose tail is kind of very tightly coiled and kind of in a perpetually up state. So some of these breeds do have particular directions. You also have dogs that have been physically handicapped, literally, by mankind. So dogs that have had their ears docked, so dogs that are normally with floppy ears, like most of the bully breed dogs, Dobermans, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, Great Danes, all of these dogs that have their ears sliced, wrapped in plaster, and kind of perpetually put into very alert forward positions that may or may not be where the dog's ears are for a particular emotion. And then the same goes with the tail. If a dog's tail is docked, it's very difficult to read unless you get up really close to their backside where that tail position would be if a long tail were attached on the end. And so looking at all of those things together is really, really important. Now, you do have dogs where there is incongruity. You do have dogs where what they're saying with their body, what their vocalizations say, and kind of where they are emotionally are a mismatch. This, to be clear, this in my experience is not usual. Usually the dog's body language and vocalizations are pretty well matched. We do have a couple of dogs that we've worked with here where there's a mismatch, like what the dog's saying with its body and what its vocalizations sound like don't go together. So the dog will have relaxed body language but dominant aggressive vocalizations, or other way around, which is very, very confusing. And you'll also have other dogs, especially this is particularly a challenge for bully breed dogs, whose ears have been cropped, whose tail have been docked, and whose natural body posture is very chest forward, very assertive. So you have these dogs that come into a group of dogs, and as far as the dog is concerned, the other dogs are concerned, they see a dog kind of coming in hot with a very assertive body posture, and there can be some serious friction when dogs like that meet, especially if you're in a place like a public dog park. Now, if you're in a space where you've got a lot of balanced dogs and you have a slightly less balanced dog that enters, the friction will be a little bit less, but it is no less important to make sure that you are managing that behavior and monitoring the dogs very, very closely. The key in all of this is knowing your own dog. When you are out with a dog, your dog, and knowing your dog's natural state and being really aware of even minute changes in your dog's behavior is going to be a critical way for you to have preventive approaches to issues. The time to address a dog's discomfort isn't the point at which the dog is already uncomfortable. The point to address the discomfort is when you start to see the changes in the dog's body language that imply that the dog is starting to get uncomfortable. So meaning, if I'm walking down the street with my dog and my nose is in my phone, or I'm on a phone call and I'm kind of in another place and I'm just kind of walking with my dog, not really paying attention, I'm not really going to see that my dog is starting to physically alert, physically lock in on something. And by the time I'm aware, the dog is already out on the end of the lead and has already reacted to something. Yet, if I can see my dog starting to change its body posture, maybe even hear an initial vocalization from the dog, in that moment, I can intervene, redirect my dog, and help keep my dog stable in almost any situation. So that is our lesson for the day, folks. Hopefully you were able to hear me. I gotta say that talking with a mask on is weird. I do not know how superheroes do it. It's very difficult. My respect for superheroes, like especially Spider-Man, because that outfit is super clingy also, which has to be not particularly breathable. Anyway, that has been it for today for our Canine Linguistics course. Thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. And don't forget, fix your end of the leash.